this was the first step into getting rid of what I see as this, or what Nietzsche refers to as the spirit that has possessed Europe, called objectivism. Now, what he means by this is specifically Europe in the last couple hundred years around his time, we were struck by this scientific truth as celebrated as the destination to get to in our everyday, and to take ourselves sort of away from the metaphysical, from away from God. And this spirit has been it's been elevated into an ideal, this spirit of objectivism. And you can kind of look at it. The reason I say the reason why he said Europe, I think, is because when you think about it, there is a lot of like, I don't see like America, or I don't see Asia as like these objective scientific thinkers as the same as in Europe. I see I see them as more experimental. They're more sort of metaphysical. They're God fearing countries, in large regard, and so I think it makes sense with Europe. Um, and I don't think we should get rid of objectivism. I think we should see it as a spirit. We should see it as a gift from God, right? That we're able to do these great things and actually like define and shape a lot of the natural world and label them into something that a lot of people can learn from, and it makes life a lot easier to label things. But it shouldn't be a spirit that possesses people. And I think that's what's happened, is the world has become too objective. And there's and lastly, I guess the problem with this is that Nietzsche argues that we talked about a lot about the will to power. He said objectivism kills the will to power. It paralyzes it. You kind of enter this dogmatic thing where like you're no longer being self-exploratory, and you are just taking things like, oh no, that won't work because it's because of XYZ. You're I might actually take a break there just to sort of regather my notes and things and get your thoughts before I can get speak about the last bit, because I don't want to get it wrong.
Yeah, okay. Um, yeah, I like it. I like it. I think experiential knowledge is really, really powerful, but it's something so undervalued because of this pedestalization of objectivity, that there's a truth with a capital T that isn't liable to interpretation, that does exist. And if your experience and thoughts and feelings aren't in line with that truth with a capital T, in some sense, you're wrong. But should that be the metric that we measure our lives upon? Or should it be on meaning, personal meaning, feelings that things matter, experiences matter, people matter? And I think as I'm getting older, I'm moving towards this, experience being the most important measure of life, not truth, objective truth. It's about experience. I mean, you know, and also there's something to personal experience that directs like our personal compass of truth and of what matters. There's something to the personal experience element that solidifies that so much more than just being told, you know? And that's why, fundamentally, my worldview has been influenced by just what I've gone through personally with my, I don't know, my disability, or things during lockdown, or psychedelic experiences maybe, or general spiritual experiences, the amount of hours I spent in meditation during lockdown and things like this, and stuff I've learned in the sporting world and people I've met. All that comes together and builds my worldview. Yes, I've learned stuff from books, and there are ideas that have resonated and quotes that I've saved and things that stay in the sort of pool of my mind that I bring out in podcast conversations. But the majority of it is just through what I've felt from engaging with the world myself. And that, one can argue, that should be the metric for defining what we should pursue. And everything else, unless we're sending ourselves on a really bad path, we should listen to that intuition. I mean, it's pithy and it's, said too much, but Jung's little aphorism of those who look outside dream and those who look inside awaken, there's something to it. There's
Mm.
something to it.
It reminds me of the Procrustean bed Greek myth
Yes.
of, for people that don't know, there was this Greek legend called, well, I don't know if legend's the right word, but he was a guy called Procrustes, and he was a figure in Greek mythology who made an iron bed and he would offer it out to travelers. And travelers would stop there in this bed, in this sort of house, and they'd try and stay the night. But if they wouldn't fit on this bed, the Procrustes would chop their legs off, chop their arms off to make them fit.
Mhm.
And he would, or if they were too short, he would stretch them out. And I think you can correct me on the end of this if you're wrong, but I think all these travelers, they didn't really survive. They ended up just like getting cut and like not really going on to progress with their travels. And this concept is used to describe a situation where fixed reality limits everything. So
Mm.
a simple example is like, imagine you say that I'm going to wake up at 5 a.m. Otherwise, like, or no, let's say you're an objective thinker and you objectively believe that if you don't wake up at 5 a.m., you're a lazy fucker. And now what you've done is you've created a procrastinating bed where you've taken everyone that doesn't wake up at 5 a.m., you've chopped them up a bit, and you've said, okay, you're not a successful person because you don't do this one thing that I believe is a fundamental axiom. And you'll take someone who's a very successful person who wakes up at 9 a.m. and instead of questioning like why are they doing this? You kind of just ignore them. I think that's how it play. That would be how it would play out in real life. You'd be like, you'd dismiss it, you'd ignore that person. And the interesting thing I find about this myth is that this frame is very egotistical. The only thing being a Procrustean, the only thing the Procrustean bed serves is Procrustean himself. It is a frame that he's created for everyone else. It doesn't serve anyone else. It's very egotistical. So I think we can point out this for objectivism, and that like it doesn't serve everyone necessarily being an objectivist. You're trying to limit everyone, and in doing so, I think you're only going to harm yourself.
Let me expand on the Procrustean myth for a second, Jacob, because when I learned about this extra detail of it, it made it even more significant. So, do you know about the, I want to say, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, the Eleusinian Mysteries?
No.
So, basically, there's a book called The Immortality Key, and that book is about the Eleusinian Mysteries. And it's basically a series of theories that many of the ideas that built the Western world that the Greeks came to were founded in these. I'm using shit terminology here, but I'm going to roll with it. In these meetups, in this place called Eleusis, where thinkers would come and they would use a substance that people have argued was a psychedelic, right? And they would meet in Eleusis and discuss all the great ideas, and that was a large contributor to the Greek. And I'm kind of going into unknown territory for me here, but the many ideas we've got from the Greeks that built sort of Western civilization. Now, the bed of Procrustes myth, right, or Procrustes is a den, right, where he would lure travelers in. That myth says that he caught travelers on the journey from Athens to Eleusis when they were going on the journey to engage in an Eleusinian mystery. And so the interpretation that an author called Hassim Taleb wrote, and also something that makes sense to me, just resonates with me, is that these people were going on a journey to self-exploration, self-transcendence. They were, and if we see Eleusis then as a symbol of that, of a symbol of a journey into oneself, a journey into the truths of the universe, a journey to explore the biggest and deepest ideas. that along the way, there was somebody trying to lure those travelers off that path and lure them back into conformity. That on the path to self-mastery and self-discovery, there will be distractions and there will be creatures along the way that will try and lure you back into being like everyone else and try and squash you into this pre-packaged form that the Procrustean bed represents. Now, how good is that? I mean, we've talked about before about the woman in the red dress, the idea from the Matrix that when you're trying to do something, there will be signals of pleasure that will try and lure you off that path. That's what the woman in the red dress represents. But the Procrustean bed is something different. It's similar to that, but it's something different. That there will be a force trying to pull you back into being like everyone else, and trying to in your idea here, which makes a lot of sense to me. There will be a force trying to lure you back into the objective worldview, lure you back into following that there's one way that reality exists as, there's one way that we should see life. There's one way that we should measure the quality of life, and take you away from exploring one's own personal experience. I don't know. Maybe I'm stretching, but
No, that was good, man. That was really good. I like that. Yeah, because I think when you're on an exploratory path and you're trying to achieve a level of uncertainty, there will be some people that want to put you back into certainty. We've discussed how certainty kills and it removes the spirits. And I think these scientific objective people, they're envious. They don't understand the natures of, I think Nietzsche puts it, whose elevations which they cannot attain. Because think about it, by being an objectivist, you've limited not only other people but yourself, because you can't do anything that is uncertain. You can't do anything that's exploratory. You have to just rely on you just have to rely on the world as it is, the universe as it is, this limited reality that you've created. So you're going to be envious of people that are transcending it. And I think that's what it points to for me, is that story it illustrates it perfectly. That is generally what's going to happen, because these people, they're also very skeptical. They're very skeptical at any idea that is a bit kind of risky, a bit kind of revolutionary. You hear something, you don't agree with it, you dismiss it. You're skeptical, and your any kind of idealism, big ideas, and things like that. So it's very clear to me, and I think my last thing I guess I'll point to is that Nietzsche ended this passage, and he was like, "This is what philosophy has come to. It is now it's turned into a critical science rather than an exploratory thing." And it was quite a saddening note, but he was someone that was going to try and change that. And he pointed to Kant as a lot of the problem. He pointed to Hegel and some other guys as a lot of the problem. And then he also made this comment about how a lot of these exploratory people, they're often females, and they're often, and males are more objectivists. Just in our nature. And to me, it made a lot of sense. Like, there is a kind of a gender difference here. I do find females a little bit more kind of right brain, and men a bit more left brain, and maybe that's due to our sort of levels of conscientiousness difference and openness. But
to me, what that does, just to jump in before you go on, is it's because the feminine to me is the force of creation. It is where life is. The life is created in the feminine. And in that there's an element of mystery and chaos to how things become, how things be, how things are created, and how a human goes from a single cell, but how the universe and the planets and the stars and the solar system came to be, full stop. In that there is chaos, and in that is mystery, and that creation is a feminine energy. Anyway, carry on. That's what I think.
I think that's good, actually, because creation would make sense, because when you have a baby, it's like, it's not just science, bro. Like that's something way bigger than science, and you have the ability to do that as a female. So maybe that's the reason. So I think the lesson there with the gender thing, I think you can say, you need both objectivism and subjectivism, and this is generally the thought that I've came to, is yes, there are things that, like, let's take a topic like morality. You can generally agree that objectively, like, you're not supposed to murder people, but there is some context which you could argue it. But that's why I want to come to is that, yes, objectively, there are some truths that are generally in place, but there is a level of subjectivism. And I think that's the same in metaphysics. I think that's the same in a lot of these different philosophical branches, that there is a genuine vibe of objectivism, and then there is a lot of subjectivity is under that as well. And I think that's just how the world works. And
Well,
I think
that's
with the male and the female, that's like we want both. Both is good. Both is good.